right. Thank you, Chris.
Well,
Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm, thrilled to be here. We've seen some great sessions, really interesting insights to the different areas in faculty development and remote teaching. I'm going to talk about putting students first during COVID-19, which may seem simple to many teachers because we teach students, but it's not always that easy. So like Chris said, my name is Helena and I'm at SUNY Cortland here. Been here since 2011. Let me see if I can click on it to move it. There we go. So everybody is in the same boat. It probably happened about March. For SUNY Cortland, about a week before spring break, they decided to shut things down, which definitely caused obviously some confusion and fear from both students and faculty. But because we had that week of spring break, we had some time to rearrange and rethink and really organize ourselves before we headed back to school. So one of the first things we did was get together with some of our faculty and kind of figure out what's next. The goal of this presentation is to really kind of look at how students can help us as faculty. And we always say we teach students. I am coming from a department with about 800 in our major, 800 plus, and all of them have the same major. And so that's a lot of students. And I can say that I know some of my students, but they take classes with many different professors, and with that many students, I can only assume what they know and what they like and what they think and how they feel, but I can't really know. So one of the basics, going back to basics as far as designing your classes and designing your teaching, is putting the student first. So asking the students. This presentation will show you how we did that twice. So we asked the students questions right in the beginning of when COVID hit with the shutdown. Then we seek to understand, seek to implement some changes from that understanding. And then we evaluate it by also asking the students again to reflect on what happened more towards the end of the spring. And currently we are going to add a new survey coming up here pretty soon to ask for their input of the fall, as well as thinking about the spring. So the two surveys that I developed were a little bit different. So the survey number 1 was in the beginning of remote teaching, and the survey number 2 was at the end of the spring semester. Survey number 1 did request email addresses and identifiers of students. And the reason for that is because our main purpose was that we were kind of worried about students who were falling through the cracks. So it was almost kind of like a wellness check, seeing how they were doing and seeing if they had everything that they needed. And the only way to really check with them one-on-one is to be able to seek out those students and actually contact them personally to check in with them. And we were able to do that in the first survey. The second survey was actually anonymous, just to kind of do more about reflection, take that identifier out, so maybe there would be more freely to express themselves and their feelings through the experience. Survey 1 was a lot about access and what kind of tools they have, what are their needs, what are their fears, but also to promote some remote study habits. So a survey can ask questions, but through the questions, a survey can also share ideas. And that was a focus point for that survey as well. And the second survey was definitely more reflective. What were your experiences? What's, kind of to see how did we do. Let's look at the first survey. We realized pretty quickly that not all our students had reliable internet. They didn't all have laptops. A big one was access to quiet space. A lot of our students have siblings and parents who work from home. A lot of sharing of devices, and definitely not good Wi-Fi and limited streaming. So that was, is something to consider as a faculty and as a school or a college, more than just individually, because I think that was the biggest wake up call for me, is that I'm just one class. They usually take 6 or 7 or 8, and they have to manage all of it. So how do we think beyond just us? The biggest thing that we took care of for right away is we made sure that all our students had a laptop. There were some students who decided to stay around campus if they were on off-campus housing because they didn't have the needs at home, but they did not have access to their computers. So they weren't really asking for it, but I noticed that there were some students who were doing all their work on their phone, which we all know is very difficult. I mean, right now I'm looking at 4 screens, and I think there can always be more. So having a little tiny screen to work from, write papers, do homework from is very limited. So we were able to help the students get access to computers. Some students who didn't have Wi-Fi, we would follow up and we would say, what are the providers in the neighborhood? Are you alone? Who's with you? How can I help? Sometimes just asking questions and guiding them through the process for them to be able to say, okay, I'm going to talk to these people or this people, and I'm going to do that. A lot of students didn't have access to quiet spaces, so we kind of talked through that with them, where when during the day is it most quiet, when is it not. So a lot of students actually opted to study or reorganize their study plans to focus certain tasks on certain times of the day when siblings were most or least active on the computer as well. So talking through those problem-solving scenarios was helpful. And then a big one was time management. A lot of students, just like faculty, we went from, especially in the physical education department, which is where I work, we go from going to classes that have a mixed bag of physical activity and lecture-based classes where we're up and walking and running and skipping and we're with kids, and you're putting them in front of a computer full-time all day long. So considering that, one of the techniques that I actually learned from a few years ago at CIT conference here at SUNY Cortland was the Pomodoro Technique. And I use it all the time. And I teach my students all the time about the big tomato, the Pomodoro timer that you can set, and where you say, remove all the distractions, put the timer on 25 minutes and focus on one task for 25 minutes, and then take a break, do something else, switch it up. And I go by that, and I find that if students actually try it out, they will come back and tell me, hey, it worked. I just have to figure out a way to actually have them do that, to go through the practice and having the feeling of I accomplished something that often would take me so long because I had so many distractions and I wasn't focused, and I had so many goals and so many things on my checklist that I felt overwhelmed. So a lot of our students felt that way. So we had to kind of try to tell them to focus, help them with time management. And that's one technique. Try to keep it simple for them. Then I put these little points. I thought myself on what are some really easy tips for our students to use so that they can be more successful in studying at home. And one of the things, making a schedule, having some structure in my day, like a routine, doing course assignments when the class is scheduled, thinking about scheduling it that way versus making their own blocks. Communicate with professors personally when I have questions, reading and understanding the expectations of my classes, taking breaks throughout, staying active several times during the day, being kind and flexible with my instructors. So towards the blue is I use it every day, and towards the red or the orange is I don't believe this would be very useful. And from this survey, it's very interesting that obviously there are they're not as kind and flexible with themselves. But a big one was their scheduling and their time management. So they don't necessarily are taught how to time manage classes when they're in remote teaching. This is very new to them. They don't know how to manage their time, and our students seem to just go by blocks and by homework. When something is due, if it's due that Monday, that's what they'll work on that Monday. If it's due Friday, we'll work on it for Friday. And unfortunately, a lot of the classes and faculty don't necessarily advocate for that. They like you to study throughout the week, so then you can take your quiz or test on Friday. They like you to do a little bit of work throughout the week so you can hand it in. So that was also something that I had to wrap my brain around, to say, how do I do this? Do I have things smaller that are due at different increments, or bigger and once, so that they can just focus on one thing? So those are all questions that popped up after reviewing this information. But the goal not only was to get kind of this this information for us, but also to tell the students, to give them some ideas of, these are things that can make your life a little bit easier and that are important. It's important to be kind. It's important to be flexible with yourself. It's important to take some breaks, but it's also important to set a schedule and to figure out, how your time would work. This is the first survey, so a little bit different than what later will come up, the second one. Some common fears will be that it's too much work, so many, from having 6 to 8 classes on campus to going all online. How will I manage that? The directions are unclear, confusion, and probably the biggest thing that we as a faculty had to think about was how different our students in this department learn. They're physical education majors, so that they are learning through movement and about movement all the time. And now it's almost like you're taking that movement away. So how do you deal with that? How do you help them out with that? A lot of times we dealt a lot with students who, when they went home, they worked. They had it right away. They equated home with vacation and work. They didn't equate it with learning. So I've actually heard students say that, they didn't feel like they were learning. So when they're home, they don't have the motivation, and they rather make money when they're home, or just don't do anything than focus on their studies. It was almost like it's separate. School is separate from work, from home. So these were some interesting common fears of our students. And then also were some of our students are quite resilient, and you have a mixed bag. Obviously, you have some students who are very fearful, but then you also have some students who are very resilient and saying, we can do this. This is what our cards are. Let's see how we can challenge ourselves. And I actually talked to one of the students at open house. A lot of the new students or prospective students were asking, how are you dealing with this? Common question, right? For new freshmen coming in, they're like, how is this? This is scary. How are you dealing with this? And one of our majors said, well, as a teacher, you're going to be dealt with a lot of different cards too, and a lot of different challenges. And I feel like, yes, it wasn't easy. I had to do a lot of problem solving. I have to do a lot of different things. However, I feel like it's making me a better teacher, because there's so many different challenges that I need to address. So in a way, there are quite a few students who are very resilient. And now, taking that, I kind of felt that it's our job to show some of this resilience to our students, model this resilience, but also can we teach them some of these skills to become resilient? Or is it too late? They're in it right now. A lot of students are in that negative mode too, where they feel like they're stuck. They say that I did not sign up for this. I don't want to do this. Therefore, this is not me, and I should not have to do this. So to get out of that frame of mind, how do we do that? And how do we do it at a distance? So that's important too. So then after we collected the data, I shared the results with the faculty, and we came up with some easy tips. The biggest thing for our faculty was that not all our faculty were using the same LMS organization system. Some of them, you know, granted, not all our courses use LMS. A lot of our courses are physical activity courses. You come in, you're physically active, you learn through class, and many of the faculty have never used the LMS system. So one of our biggest things was to create a template for Blackboard and how to organize your class and how to make it very, very simple, but consistent across the department. So when students would come in, they would know where to look for due dates, for their weekly goals. It would be organized maybe by week, and it would be similar to other faculty. So that was a big part probably of that first discussion. And my role in that was probably just helping with Blackboard, especially the physical activity instructors. If they had some issues, I just helped them out because I've used Blackboard a little bit longer. And the majority was just making it simple, you know, not being overwhelmed, but kind of focusing on using Blackboard rather than email, because that would overwhelm everybody, and the students got very overwhelmed with that as well. We did get together with some faculty in the beginning when this all went down and created some videos related to physical activity for those courses specifically. The department implemented something that was called Lms Buddies. So in case something happened, someone could take over or could help with Blackboard or the class. So this was someone, which in a large department is actually not too difficult to do, because we don't own one class and many people are teaching the same class but different sections. So you could kind of buddy up to help each other out. And we definitely were at that time, you know, in the spring, we were talking about emergency teaching and what is it. So basically that first survey and the action that we took was, what are the tips and strategies for emergency teaching? How do we help the students? How do we keep our integrity and keep our standards for our classes, but still are flexible with their needs and their concerns? And how do we do all that? And then, you know, finally, in the end, we realized that if things got a little messy and we didn't know what to do, the best thing to do is go back to basics, look at your outcomes and how can we address them in an online environment. That was a big one as well, because all our instructors know their objectives, and now it may just be to rethink those strategies. Looking at the second survey, just a quick review, it's more about reflection and their experiences. And through that survey, my goal was also to kind of evaluate to see if what are our instructors doing that was good, so that we could see maybe there was a shift from that first survey to the second survey to see if we are more consistent and being more clear, more available, all of that. And some of the demographics, very interesting. It was a very small percentage of freshmen actually answered the survey. So the next survey that I'm going to do, I'm going to specifically also send it to the Core 101 classes that the students have to complete or completed in part of their semester, and to see if that instructor couldn't help distribute the survey again. It doesn't hurt, but I would love to know more about what our freshmen are going through. A lot of juniors, sophomores, and seniors, it's about equal. And I think this is also related because we do have a ton of transfers. So it's not abnormal that there may be less freshmen, but 6% is too low. So I want to definitely seek out. As far as the graduate, I'm currently the graduate coordinator, so I think I would perhaps just send it from me to the graduate students instead of from the secretary to the whole student population. So freshman and graduate, I think we can do a better job at maybe kind of focusing to make sure we get a little bit more students responding to the survey. Still, students are using their phone. About 3 students who responded still told me that they're using their phone, but the majority is using their laptop. Now, we don't know which students those are, but I do know that one of the tips that we told the faculty is, in the beginning of your class or when it goes remote at any time, specifically ask them if they have a laptop, if they need any help with anything within their class, rather than the big survey to get that information, so that we can still help those students. So this is just for us to know that this is not over yet. There's still students who are just using their phone. So that's important. Reliable internet and quiet space, that, is still an issue, and the quiet space is actually become a bigger issue for a lot of students. So this is something to consider, especially when you're creating assignments, because some assignments need a really concentrated quiet space, and it goes very deep into knowledge and content. And, not that you cannot do those assignments, but this is something, when I'm thinking about like exams, I went more towards, what can I do a project where they can work on it when they have time, over a certain time, where they can show more application. So there are certain things that when I saw that does impacted me, that did impact me as a teacher moving forward. The questions that we asked was, how are you doing right now? And what's helping you learn in remote teaching? What are your professors doing right now that's helping you learn? What's the most challenging part? What would help you to become more successful? And looking into the future, what are some of your fears, concerns, or questions? And that we did have a space for people who have unique experiences, and anybody who could really want to share with us what they're going through and giving us some context. We're free to do that if they'd like to. 2 separate kind of themes here when we talked about what helped them. One was related to the students and how the students helped themselves, kind of, and then one was related to the faculty and what did faculty do to help them. And a lot of the times, it's that making a list, setting a routine, staying organized was a big thing that came out with the students. Otherwise they became overwhelmed and they couldn't keep up. So they really had to get organized throughout the week. When I talked to my students during that class, I actually specifically said, Sunday, put some time aside to look at every class and put in your due dates. Look at how long. Don't just think about the due dates, but look at how long a task would take you and plug it into your schedule. But just to make a schedule before Monday is really an important task for the students, to say that that's actually going to set you up for success, is going to lower anxiety throughout the week, and how to do that. I think they're used to making schedule as far as when is my class, but they're not necessarily used to make a schedule for how much time will each assignment take, when do I put time to just study instead of doing assignments, and plugging that all into the schedule when you're doing remote learning. So those were some things that we talked about. Using their resources. The quiet spaces came up again, really trying to find. So one student had to drive to their grandma's place to do work. But that's a big problem solving strategy right there. Can they go somewhere? Waking up early, doing it at night, which these things are really important for us to know. So then, when we think about online learning, we think about asynchronized versus synchronized versus, forcing students to complete work at a certain time during the day. All of those questions come to mind when you see that some students can only do their work in the morning or at night, because some of our students are actually taking care of other kids. So, and of their homework and helping them out. So that they're, you know, at the bottom, which was a really interesting one, which I mentioned before, is, you know, one student, what helps you learn? Nothing. I feel like I'm not learning at all. So there are students that don't feel like that they are learning, and that online education or online learning, online teaching is not for them. They feel lost. They don't believe that this is learning, and this is something really important to note as a faculty member, to be able to talk to them about it going into the fall, because we knew that this was not going to be a quick turnaround, and we knew that there was going to be something different about this fall. So having that information is really, really important to kind of tell the student what does learning look like online, is really important. Then the faculty, you know, some of the biggest things were that the faculty did do a lot of, we actually did some conferences on that, to do voiceover presentations using video presentations, being flexible, doing sticking with your hours and actually meeting with students, having virtual meetings. Frequent check-ins, we advocated for that. You know, some instructors did it weekly. By the end of the week, how do you feel? How are you doing? And just a time for students to let the instructor know how they're doing. And just being available, responding to students, because usually they just ask in, you know, in the class, they'll just ask a question and you answer it right away. But online, it is not that case, and students, you know, like to have answers. So knowing that, finding ways to respond quicker, and, you know, obviously within reason, within the workday. But so a lot of our faculty have explored Microsoft Teams, WebEx, email, whatever works. Having a structure came through quite a bit, and this was kind of, this gave us the evidence of, okay, these are some things, clear directions, having a structure, being available, that we kind of worked on from that first survey. So these are the things that they really like, and this is working. So that's very important. A bigger thing that we talked about after this was, you know, when you're adapting a course for online education, how do you, you know, make it so it's, you know, lighter workload, but maybe different workload. So how do you consider the workload? Because you also have to remember that students also are learning to do it online and not just in class. They may be learning new technologies, new tools, and that takes time as well. So those are a few things that they mentioned. These are a few stories, and I'll let you read them while I'm here. All right. So these stories just make us grounded. That's what I think. I think it's important to give them a voice. You know, a lot of times we ask them how they feel, but we don't really take the time to stop and really focus on them and giving them a time to share their experiences where we can understand how their life goes, you know, and how different each of our students are, and how are we, you know, maintaining our credibility, our standards, but still knowing that we should be flexible, and we should just see the students as where they are and who they are. And so a lot of times it's a lot of one-on-one and checking in more frequently. So some heartfelt stories are very good. A lot of other stories that came through, um, definitely some very displeased students as well that just are not happy, which is normal. And that's when I always think back of that resilience work, and trying in the fall, you know, when we started, the first week is really crucial, and to kind of talk about and set them up for success where it was different. You know, it wasn't the same. We didn't have a class of 30 kids at the same time. We had to separate our students into smaller groups. So they did some remote teaching, and now we are back in study in place. So it's you know, back to kind of what happened to the spring, but with actually a bigger stress, because right now students are at home. I mean, they're at school. They're either on campus or at school, and they have to worry about the virus. That's one thing that they have to worry about, and the increase of you know, people with the virus. But they also are in dorms. They're in spaces where they can't just really readily go out and do things. So now, you know, we have to consider those things, as how do we help our students come up with some ideas to get away, to have those breaks, and to not stay inside, even though they're very fearful of going outside, and how to do that safely. So different, this is what you know, I think is really important to note, is that, and I think all the faculty are very passionate about it, is that every day is so dynamic. Everything can switch in a day, and there's so many different things that are popping up each day. So new strategies, you know, we need to, you know, come up with new strategies all the time. So from the spring, what we learned about the spring is that the reality is that they don't have the time to give to a class that they would on campus. They don't have the space to do their work at home. A big thing, they lack motivation. They just can't get motivated. Even the best students have shared with me that they just don't find the motivation to do their best work, and they have a lot of distractions at home. Their needs, oh, let me just go back to that slide. Their needs are that they, you know, they need better time management. They need to be heard, they need to be seen. Let me pull it back up here. There you go. And they need their motivation back. I mean, it's a big thing. And then, you know, the final thing is that they really needed to be connected with their with each other, with other people, and with the professors. And from the professors, they want feedback. They want regular feedback. They want professors to be available. They want them to be clear, organized, and of course, they want less work. But I equate less work, and I think that's important to note this, is that less work is sometimes we have to rethink the work, and not just, you know, it should be quality versus quantity is a big one here. And I know I'm running probably out of time here. Some tools and strategies that we're working on right now, and that we worked on during the summer, is we have to consider how to transform our classes, not just how to put them online, but how to rethink our, you know, how to address our outcomes. We also have to think about how we have our specific attitudes and behaviors, how they reflect on our students. Our dispositions, the way we talk, the way we email, the way we portray ourselves needs to be resiliency, so that they can see that passion, see the resilience, and hopefully it's contagious. We need to set clear expectations throughout. Simplify and unify our LMS structures is key. And I think overall, our school, our college has been doing a lot with trying to do that across our departments. We should teach about different modalities of teaching and learning. The Udl strategies are awesome to learn for that. We should have conversations with our students. We should listen to their thoughts, feelings, and ideas. And we should know that we're not in this alone, that we should work together, be transparent, and evaluate, ask questions a lot, and reflect a lot. And I think I'm probably out of time, right?
Yeah, we do have to transition to the next presentation. But one of the good things about online is we don't have to all shuffle in and out of a room. So Ariana's presentation starts at 1:55. So if anybody has questions while we do that for Helena, feel free to jump in now, and I'll give Ariana the.
Now look at the questions here a little bit too. Yes, the spring will likely be more of the